Yes, yes. You know what, Jackson?
What's up?
I want this one today.
Hell yeah.
So be prepared for the next 55 minutes. You're about to get it. Yeah, you like that?
If I had a nickel for every time, man.
So hot.
So hot.
You're so hot, man.
Thanks, you too.
Texted 314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line. And then you can also participate in the YouTube chat. And boy, I'll tell you what, Tiny PP, Droid Effects, Bach Hog. Is it Bocog? Bach Hog or Bach Hog?
Let's go with Bach.
Adam Barry wants to know if Jackson will ask Rockio or Iggy's hedonism book is stat. Bishing about sport. I can't wait for these World Junior takes from Jackson on this beautiful, chilly Monday morning.
USA wins.
Look at you.
Yeah,
There's your take.
I saw them celebrating. Good for them.
But how about the performance from these members of the Blues organization?
Yeah, Jimmy Snuggerud, who I've previously mentioned is the most adorable name in hockey. He's a hell of a player, man. Even as someone that doesn't watch hockey, you can tell. That guy knows how to play the sport.
Jeremy Rutherford's going to give us his perspective. He's with us at 10:45. I got a lot to talk about with this Jeremy Rutherford. So I'm going to do everything I can within my power. And I realize it's out of my control.
It is.
To break at 10:40 to maximize, which means I got to start breaking at the right time. First segment, domino effect. And these Blues are red hot. And I now shall yield my time to the gentleman who will ask me 6 questions. We'll probably get to half of them. And his name is Jackson Burkett, but he'd prefer if you call him Sir Piddles.
That's right, Tim. The Athletic has the Blues listed as a bubble team for the playoffs and described them as cautious sellers as the deadline approaches. Do you agree with this summary? And how do you think the Blues will approach the deadline given where this season has taken them and what the future may or may not hold?
I don't know. It's so tough because they just beat 2 of the better teams in the league. 2-1. You know how many 5-on-5 goals they've given up here over the last 125 minutes, right?
Of course. I don't even want to patronize the listeners by saying it. I think we all know it.
Right, because it's of course 6.
7, 6.
It's 1.
Oh, yeah. Well, better than none. Am I right?
Well, none would be better if they gave up.
Oh,
0.
giving up. Got it.
You want to issue an apology or anything? You would want to prepare yourself for Jeremy Rivers just coming in here and.
Yeah. I'm not. My boots are not shaking. I'll tell you that much.
Fair enough. Jamie, come on in. The water's warm.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
And the way they continue to shut down the opposition's top players, I don't know. I sit here and I'm all over the map on it because there has been more consistent play since Drew Bannister took over. They just beat the Canucks and the Hurricanes. You're going to get a healthy, happy heaping of Eastern Conference hockey here, Jackson, as you know.
Yeah, the blue shirts.
Yes.
They're coming to town?
They are on Thursday.
Nice.
Tell the audience how much you knew about the blue shirts as of 120 minutes ago.
Yeah, so it came up on TMA that the Blues are playing the blue shirts.
Right.
And if lie detector, gun to my head, say who are the blue shirts, I would have thought they were the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Right.
I've been wrong.
Correct.
Because that's the New York Rangers.
Yes! Right here in St. Louis on Thursday. First, the Florida Panthers tomorrow night. And you can catch all the action on 101 ESPN pregame at 6 p.m. Then after the Rangers, the Boston Bruins. And then we'll wrap up this 4-game stretch against the East on Monday. Martin Luther King Day, Philadelphia Flyers.
Nice.
I mean, you're getting this test this month against some of the best in the league.
Yeah, tough opponents.
A lot of Eastern Conference. Mm-hmm. And they keep hanging with them. And if you want to take it back before they beat the Canucks, you'd go, okay, well, what about the games against the Avalanche and the Penguins? And you'd go, they were right there to pick up at least a point against the Avalanche before giving up a late goal. And it was a different game against the Penguins, but it's not like they played terribly against Pittsburgh. I don't know.
You can go even as far back as that Blackhawks game. And while I know the Blackhawks aren't, much to look at.
The Sunday charge they mounted the night before Christmas Eve. You better believe it, Jackie Papers.
That just wasn't a thing when Berube was the coach.
They're coming back, and now they're coming back. Yeah. I don't know. So then I sit there and I go, this is a much different trade deadline conversation than last year when you had a bunch of unrestricted free agents. And it you weren't getting this kind of performance against these caliber of teams, but it was right around this time last year where it became, okay, the Blues have this big home stretch, let's see what they can do, and they didn't do anything, and that wrapped it up, and there was no decision to make. The decision was made for Doug Armstrong. This is a different situation, both in the caliber of the unrestricted free agents and also the way the Blues have been playing. So I don't know. I just don't know. Here's what I do know. I love watching it, and I love the way they've been playing against some of these top-tier teams. They haven't been playing butt-asses. They've been playing top-tier teams. And before the game against Colorado, they beat Dallas. I was at that game. This has not been a run against the dregs of the NHL. So it's pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to 4 at home, see if they can capitalize on the momentum that they have. Blues and Panthers tomorrow night, Blues and blue shirts.
Right. Great uniforms on the Rangers, by the way. They earned the blue shirt title. That's a great look.
Look at that.
They nailed
so now
it.
you're on board. Now with knowing what they are indeed called. Jeremy Rutherford's going to give his perspective. A lot of talk, of course, on the Blues' recent performance, and also we'll talk about that question, but also the young players in the Blues organization who put on clinics at the World Juniors. We're going to go into that with JR as well. So if you want to go, I would call it like nerding. Yeah. We're going to go nerding. This is going to be hardcore stuff. You're a hardcore hockey guy. This is your segment at 10:45.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that people are like, oh, Jackson doesn't care about hockey. I think the talk is too pedestrian. Like, I want to get deeper into the weeds. I want to start talking about the forecheck, the back check, other hockey terms. I just want it all. So if it comes off that I don't care, that's wrong. I care too much.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a revelation today.
Boys better prep saying Stanley Cup champion Drew Bannister, 618.
I'll practice it in the mirror.
Can you imagine?
Phew. Yeah.
You know what I'm going to do right now?
Take a look at the odds.
You're damn right. Boy, you read me like a book. What do you think the odds are for the Blues to hoist the chalice? Because we're not getting ahead of ourselves here on the show.
I'm going to say some number that's going to be asinine, but I'll go 90-1.
So that would be plus 9,000. Is my math correct?
Yeah. 90-1.
I'm going to say, because that plus 9,000, I'm going to say plus 15,000.
Okay, so $1.50 to 1.
That's probably too much. Now that I've said it, I feel like it. Oh, plus 12,500. All right.
Okay, so right in the middle.
We were both within the range.
Yeah.
And I overbid, so you win Showcase Showdown.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Well, I'm an optimist at heart.
Boston Bruins are your favorite for the record. Bruins, Avalanche, and Rangers are all tied at plus 800. So the Blues get to see 2 of those 3 here this week.
Yep. Just as soon as you think you got the Blues figured out, Tim, they do some or go on a run that completely confuses you. Like a week and a half before Berube was fired, they looked great. They drop a couple to some less than stellar teams. New coach. It's just how it works.
Nathan Walker getting things going on Saturday night, and then Braden Shen gets the winner in the shootout. So the Blues, we'll see if they can keep it going. Again, they're playing against a bunch of quality teams here in these next 3 games. And then you'll also see the Philadelphia Flyers on Monday. All right, Jackson, we'll break, so I'm going to stay on the clock. That's what I'm going to do. Jeremy Rutherford, 1045. This is Balloon Party, driven by Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota, and Munganess St. Louis Acura on 101 ESPN and the 101 ESPN YouTube channel. got to go. We got to go. We got to go. Pacing. Jeremy Rutherford, 10:45. I got so much to go. We got Jack Flaherty saying weird things on a podcast, and we got Blake Baker going to LSU. We got to go. We got to go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
I don't know why that's so funny to me. All right. Blake Baker is heading to Baton Rouge to become the highest paid assistant coach in college football. What do you make of the move?
$2.5 million?
Yeah. And I think he's like considerably more than the next highest paid assistant.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets any extra money or if it's in the contract that Brian Kelly will try to dry ump him on that graphic. But yeah, he is heading to Baton Rouge. I didn't get your opinion because you were running the board on TMA today. What was your thoughts when that happened on Friday night? Because you were probably focused on the big game with Georgia the next day at Mizzou Arena.
Yeah, tough one. Sean East.
Tough.
Played 40 minutes. Either way. My opinion on this is I kind of felt it coming Thursday afternoon, Friday morning.
I was surprised when I texted Gabe, and I know I read it on Balloon Party and probably TMA as well, that Gabe thought it was 50.5% that he would go. And the only reason when you go, well, that wasn't really like convincing. But for me, I was like, oh, it's that high.
Yeah, right.
A couple of things. Well, go ahead. I cut you off because I'm a narcissist.
The way I look at it is it's a guy, this is kind of what happens in college football. You have success, especially 2 years of success in the SEC. You're going to be highly sought after. His New Orleans/Louisiana connections are very deep. And obviously the money they're paying him, it makes total sense for him. I'm not mad at him in terms of what Mizzou is going to do. I personally would like them to hire from within because I feel like just kind of echoing what Blake has been saying over the last 2 years could be helpful. I always like hiring in-house as opposed to looking elsewhere traditionally, especially with college football like that, a position like that. I think rewarding someone like the linebackers coach, DJ Smith, would be a great play. I don't think it's like now the defense is going to be in question next year. If no other coaches or no recruits follow him to LSU, I think it's like, best of luck, Blake, and Mizzou's still going to have the same goal as they did before he left.
I say this, I'd like to think those who listen to this show and TMA and Tim McKernan Show podcast would know that this is not, again, results-oriented. I'm pretty consistent on that. I'm thrilled with what took place with Missouri football this year. I couldn't be happier. As I've said oftentimes, that is my holy grail as far as sports go. I suppose United States winning the World Cup, Missouri winning a college football national championship. Other than that, I've been lucky enough to see my hometown teams win world championships with the Cardinals, Blues, and even the Rams. So with that all said, it's not something I'm necessarily expecting, but who knows? Maybe somehow there's a little chance that it could happen this year. If it's going to happen, this would be the year. Mm-hmm. So, with that all being established, I'm just not sure. I'm not saying I'm opening this up. This is not a take. It's I wonder, okay? I'm just not sure how much credit Blake Baker deserves. And this is not because he left at all. I would have said this openly. The one that I feel like you can give a lot of credit to is Kirby Moore for the 2023 season. Yeah. I think what took place in 2022, considering how bad the Missouri defense was the year before, you got to give Blake Baker all the credit in the world. But then you go, okay, how much was that players? How much was that with scheme? How much was that with other coaches? How much was that was Drinkwitz delegating offense to allow him to have more? I don't know. So that's why I'm saying this is not a take thing, and it's not he left, so I'm mad, because I'm always for people going to make more money, and I might do it someday, and so therefore I can't possibly hold somebody accountable. Whomever, whatever you think. I mean, internally, Blake Baker knows what is best for him and his family.
Right.
What pisses, I think, Missouri fans off is he tweets out the Wolf of Wall Street gif, I'm not going, I'm staying thing with Leonardo DiCaprio, Jordan Belfort, and then, not even 2 weeks later, he's gone, and that pisses people off. I think at its core, though, when a coach leaves for what is perceived as, for some, even though I think if we were to take a step back, we would say LSU is a better program, and it would be weird to say otherwise. I assure you, if you polled nationally, LSU would be considered the better program. Missouri, weirdly, may have the better chance to win. I would actually say, my opinion, period, actually, is Missouri has a better chance to win a national championship this year. A lot of that has to do with the schedule. If you look at LSU's schedule, not only do they have some brutal games in the SEC, they also have USC and UCLA in non-conference. So with that all said, I think Missouri has a better chance to win a national championship this year. I don't know what his end goal was. And I don't know how honest he will be when talking about it, and I understand that, but his wife did play soccer at LSU. He is from Louisiana. If his goal is to become a head coach, I would think staying at Missouri would have been the move. I don't know what Brian Kelly's long-term situation is there, as weird as it might sound. If Brian Kelly has a rough year this year, he might be in trouble.
Yeah.
And I know you go, well, how in the hell he won 10 games? That's what you're dealing with down there.
Yeah.
If Eli Drinkwitz wins 7 games this year, I don't think he's losing his job because of the equity that he bought this year. And I think you could tell the program was moving in the right direction last year as well. Different set of circumstances in Baton Rouge, different set of circumstances we saw in College Station. So if you're Blake Baker and you want to become a head coach, and I don't know, maybe he just wanted to get to Louisiana. Maybe there's a family situation there that he needed to get back there. I don't know. I just think that you're actually taking more of a risk from that standpoint. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a high ceiling, low floor situation. Because if he is really successful at LSU,
and you turn that defense, but Jaden Daniels isn't back there. You know, the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. It's just, you turn that one around and turn Missouri's around, you get a hell of a lot more acclaim for doing it twice and doing it Baton Rouge than doing it in Columbia. But I would think that if you have this year in Columbia and the team that Missouri could very well have, I mean, barring a miracle, Missouri's undefeated going into October. And, of course, it can happen, but it's certainly favorable for Missouri to be undefeated going into October, that you could have a significant year in Columbia and then really be positioned for a monster jump to a head coach spot. So that part surprises me, but I know that people get after guys when they make what is perceived to be a lateral move, the Mike Anderson thing. But again, with Mike Anderson, he had roots in Arkansas.
Definitely.
So that's what set people off, combined with the tweet, and it pisses people off.
Yeah. My question, I guess, would be, was it, and I'm asking, and I'm not looking for concrete details on this, but it didn't seem like it would be a surprise that LSU would fire their defensive coordinator after last season and how bad their defense was, especially compared to their offense. And if Baker, it seemed like, was the top target right out of the gate when Matt House got fired as the DC down in LSU. If I'm Blake Baker, wouldn't I keep my eyes on that and be like, oh, LSU's probably going to fire their DC. Maybe I don't tweet this thing out because it's likely going to happen, but I don't know. Maybe it was a surprise that they fired their DC. But
I agree with your thought process 100%. And I think that's another thing that has angered some Missouri fans is he knew that this could be coming. He still signed with Missouri and then went and signed with LSU less than 2 weeks later.
Right.
I think, Dan Deerdorf was on the opening drive, and Randy Carricker and I were talking about that conversation as I was coming in and he was heading out. And he said Deerdorf, of course, is excited about watching his alma mater play tonight against Washington for the national championship, but he also is incredibly critical and hates the state of college football with all of the players bouncing around and the teams bouncing around, in particular, how you're going to be traveling coast to coast and conferences. But this is another example of why players should be able to bounce around, because coaches sign a deal and then within 2 weeks they're gone. And you saw some tweets from Missouri players that were really surprised / heartbroken when it happened. On the other side of things, now Missouri may go out and take a defensive coordinator or potentially a guy who's a head coach at a lower level and make him defensive coordinator in Columbia, which means he will be leaving a deal that he signed. Now, he probably didn't sign it 2 weeks ago, but you have that aspect. I just, in general, it's part of being a college football fan. It's the cost of doing business. I mean, that's the thing. For my love for college football is like my love for mafia movies. The business is gross, but I can't get enough of it. Right. And the college football business is perhaps one of the most grotesque in sports. Speaking of grotesque, Jackson, a lot of texts that we've gotten over the years about Jack Flaherty. Although what he said in a podcast, when did this podcast come out? We just played it on TMA this morning.
Foul territory. Okay. And I don't know the release date, but it had to have been
recent.
Very recent, yes.
About the Cardinals and Wilson Contreras. I I have to tell you, I'm incredibly confused by it. I can't wait to hear what the audience thinks of it. We'll have that for you on the other side of the break. Then, Jeremy Rutherford, a lot to talk about with JR coming up at 10:45. It's all coming your way on Balloon Party. Driven by Munganess St. Louis Acura and Munganess Burkhardt Alton Toyota on 101 ESPN and the 101 ESPN YouTube channel. Munganess St. Louis Acura and Munganess Burkhardt Alton Toyota, the places I recommend you go if you are looking for a new or pre-owned vehicle. What a selection they have. Inventory galore of new cars now at stlouisacura.com and at altontoyota.com. You can work with Jamie Burkhardt, Clayton Patterson, Peter Munganess, and in the service department, Ryan Seiberg. So many wonderful people there, and it's such a pleasure to do business with them. Go online at stlouisacura.com for the new or pre-owned selection of vehicles and see for yourself what they have to offer at Munganess St. Louis Acura and Munganess Burkhardt Alton Toyota. If you have a question or request specifically for them, no problem. Just text or call 314-252-0029, and that number is for all of our listeners exclusively. It's Munganess, stlouisacura.com and altontoyota.com.
This is Action Jackson with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The college national championship game will be played tonight. And you can catch that game right here, 101 ESPN. Pregame starts at 5:30, kickoff at 6:30. And then tomorrow the Blues are playing hockey against the Panthers. You can catch that game on the home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Pregame starts at 6 p.m. Puck drops at 7. And last night in the NBA, the Magic defeated the Hawks 117-110. Paolo Banchero with 35 points and 10 rebounds. Those are their SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at Londoff.com and LondoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. Balloon Party 101 ESPN. Tim McKernan, Jackson Burkett, Jeremy Rutherford with us here at 10:45. We're going to be with him right at 10:45. So what does that mean? I got to get out at 10:41?
Yeah.
All right. Jack Flaherty appeared on Foul Territory. Wonderful podcast, Jackson. Who's on that podcast?
Isn't it Przinski?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Look at you. And this is what he had to say about his time with the Cardinals, and in particular, he is taking the blame for Wilson Contreras getting benched as catcher with the Cardinals.
He took a lot of the blame, and it really wasn't him. And I'm at fault for that because of things that I said that I did not. I was not talking about him, and it was after the start against the Angels, and I'm talking about how we're throwing pitches that don't make sense. And what I really meant to say was I'm not executing. Like, I'm throwing two strike sliders that are being called and are the right pitch, and I'm throwing them right down the middle, and that was just something that was going on, and that has nothing to do with your catcher at all. Like, it doesn't. It just comes down to execution, and you can throw the right pitch, but when you throw it over the middle plate, I'm like, that doesn't make sense in my head as to why I'm doing that and what's going on. But he came in, he wanted to learn, he wanted to work, he sat with me, he didn't go to WBC, which was a huge plus. I got to throw to him every single time. We got to work, we got to do these things. We just didn't execute, and that doesn't come down to pitch calling. You could have had Yadier Molina back there, and obviously it was an adjustment for everybody, but when you don't execute, bad things happen, and that has nothing to do with, you could call the right pitch, but when you don't execute, you throw things in the middle, just bad things happen.
Okay, that's Jack Flaherty on the Foul Territory podcast. So here is the source of my confusion. It was Oli Marmol and John Mozeliak who removed Contreras from the catching position in early May. And if what Jack Flaherty is saying is true, and then we'd have to go, well, why would he make this up at this point? He's a member of the Detroit Tigers. If what he's saying is true, and he's saying they mistook what he said for saying Contreras has us throwing the wrong pitches when he was talking about his execution of pitches, then Contreras was out as catcher for a period of time before he got to return. I would think that Jack Flaherty, if again this is true, would say, oh God, when I was saying this, I meant I was throwing the wrong pitches at the wrong time. It's not Wilson's fault. So I just don't understand this at all. One theory I have for you, Jackson, is Jack Flaherty thought this past offseason, before he had a bad 2023, that he was going to get a monster contract. And he has been labeled as problematic. And this was written by Ken Rosenthal last year. About how Flaherty isn't in lockstep with the Cardinal organization at times anyway. And perhaps he is attempting to reshape his image to get a payday at some point in 2024. Because if the reason Wilson Contreras was removed from Cardinals catcher a month into his tenure as Cardinal catcher after being the big and only free agent acquisition following the 2022 season, and it was just because of something Jack Flaherty misstated and the organization misunderstood, that would strike me as being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Thoughts, reactions, question mark?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that what Flaherty was saying got misinterpreted, which then led to Contreras sitting, seems like an easy fix where you just say, hey, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant. I might have said it, but that's not what I meant. And then it could be rectified. So there seems to be a missing piece of information, a bridge, one might say.
Oh, wow.
Between Flaherty and what he claims to be misinterpreted of what he said with Contreras' pitch calling ability, and then Wilson being sat. There has to be something else there. Otherwise, it would seem, again, like a logical fix. And now that's being said in early January when he has played for, now I guess he's on a second team, was on a different team after the deadline. It just seems odd that he would bring this up. I don't know. And the reshaping your image thing very well could be the case. It's just all very strange.
I don't know. So at the time, Ken Rosenthal wrote that comments made publicly by Flaherty about the Cardinals' pitch selection factored into the organization's decision to give Contreras a break from catching every day. Flaherty, though, doesn't always appear in sync with the organization. Some with the club believe his remark in early May about, quote, our whole staff throwing pitches that don't make sense, end quote, led to the temporary removal of Contreras as catcher. Well, now you're talking, but that's different. That's a lot different than when he just said on the podcast. Our whole staff.
Yeah, it's way different.
And if you also recall, at the time of Contreras' removal as catcher, there were multiple national writers who were saying the Cardinals bringing in Contreras didn't make sense in the first place because he wasn't necessarily known as being a great catcher. And the Cardinals' whole priority that offseason was bringing in Yadier Molina's replacement. As one may agree, or in my case, disagreed with prioritizing Yadier Molina's replacement, mainly because I just don't think you can replace Yadier Molina. There aren't a bunch of those guys out there. He's a once-in-a-generation kind of player, not just for how many games he caught, but for the way he managed the staff, the leadership, the intensity. You can't just find that on the free agent market. So with that all said, I don't really know what Jack Flaherty is saying. My theory, and I'm not saying that I think this is likely, but if I were to look at all of the possibilities, the one I would allocate the most probability for is Flaherty going, God, I just hit the free agent market. I thought I might be signing like a 5-year deal with the LA Dodgers for 9 figures, and instead I got a 1-year deal with Detroit. I better change some things. And he sits down with his agent and goes, okay, well, one of the things is you got a reputation.
Yeah.
And whether it's right or wrong, you got to do something to change it. That is what I am going to apply for this explanation, because his quote from May is our whole staff throwing pitches that don't make sense. So there, you're either throwing Contreras under the bus or you're throwing Miles Michaelis, Jordan Montgomery,
right.
Steven Matz, under the bus.
Right. Yeah, and again, like, if this was 2019 second half following that, there'd be a lot more tolerance for Flaherty's reputation. But when you've come off of the shoulder surgeries and the lack of success since then, you know, that's you look around and you get to like Snell, Glass, now Dylan Cease, all these guys who are highly sought after. If you were to mention those guys in 2019, you probably put Flaherty above all of them. But now 4 years have passed. Flaherty has not achieved that greatness that we thought he could. You can't be both. If you're going to be a perceived, I'm not saying he is because I don't know, I'm not in the locker room, a perceived problem in the locker room, you have to bring that kind of play to match it.
Well, whether he is or isn't, and as you acknowledged, we don't know.
Right.
In my interactions with him, he's the kind of guy I personally would think you would want because he is intense as hell and he is consumed with being great. But he also now is dealing with something that he wasn't last time I sat down with him for an extended conversation, and that is a shoulder, his throwing arm, shoulder injury. And he also thought that he was going to be, as many did, he's going to leave St. Louis after he's a free agent and he's going to get paid.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, look what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, he is now staring into the abyss, as weird as it might sound, of his future as a major league pitcher, because Detroit and a 1-year deal is the last stop before you start being bounce around a guy.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's probably going, okay, I got to make it clear, whether it's not right or wrong. In a national column written by a guy who's got credibility, Ken Rosenthal, he was considered to be a guy who doesn't get along with the organization and is not in lockstep with the organization. So he's going to do something to try and change it. That is what I think is an explanation for this, because it doesn't hold up compared to his previous quote. We got a break. Jeremy Rutherford going to join us. A lot to talk about with JR, both with the Blues wins against the Canucks and the Hurricanes, and then also the World Juniors. Can't wait to talk it over with him. That is next here at 10:45 on 101 ESPN. Welcome back, Balloon Party 101 ESPN. Let's go right to him, Jackson. I know you wanted to talk more about the Magic, but we don't have time for it. Jeremy Rutherford's on hold. Morning, Jer.
Morning. Tim, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Doing well. Just getting ready for practice here. Jackson talking my ear off about the NBA on the line.
I saw that whole thing. I wanted to jump across the console and rip the phone away from him. I was so pissed off. JR, what in the world is going on here? I mean, what do we got going on here?
World of sports.
I mean, this is exciting. You know, to do that to the Canucks, that's pretty damn good. And then to go down there and play that game against Carolina, and gonna get some tests here the next 3 games in St. Louis before wrapping up the homestand against the Flyers. I mean, what do we got going on?
Yeah, no, Tim, I think it's a number of things. I don't think you can point to one thing and say that's why the Blues are humming right now. You can, people want to say the coaching change. People want to say, certain players stepping up. I think it's a collection of those things. And what I'll say sticks out the most to me is the way they're playing defensively, in particular against the other team's top players. And you look at that stretch, and I know people talked about it the last week or so, but the Sidney Crosbys of the world, the Elias Petterssons of the world, they're getting nothing. Sebastian Aho, Svechnikov the other night. It's gotten to the point now where Rod Brind'Amour got his top players away from Robert Thomas in that game the other night, and Braden Shen and some other players helped out in that area. But I just think collectively they've come together really well in the defensive end. 20 5-on-5 goals against since Drew Bannister took over in a span of 10 games. And one of those games was the Tampa game when they gave up 4.
Yeah.
So you could say 16 goals against 5-on-5 in 9 of the games. So you're below 2 goals a game, 5-on-5. That's kind of an illustration of what they've done.
And then it's won over the last 125 minutes of a 5-on-5 play, because Carolina's goal is a power play goal. Am I correct on that? So you're going up against 2 of the top teams leading their divisions respectively when they played. If I'm not mistaken, maybe Carolina was in second. But either way, point being, 2 legitimate cup contenders. And you're getting those kinds of performances. I mean, that is super encouraging. And then I sit there and I go, okay, well, I mean, if we want to go all the way back, whether it be the momentum sprung from the comeback the night before Christmas Eve against the Blackhawks, they carried that over, they beat the Stars, and then played 2 good games against the Avalanche and the Penguins, just weren't able to get any points there, but they were 4 minutes away from a point against the Avs. And then you see what you saw against the Canucks and Hurricanes, and you go, okay, well, maybe there's something here. I don't know. I can't figure it out. I can't handicap. This time last year, we were about to go through that homestand where it was like, if they don't get it going here, then they're going to have to sell all those UFAs. But now, different set of circumstances, trade deadline wise, because you don't have as many guys up after this year. Do you think what they have done against the caliber of opposition they've done it against recently, and don't get me wrong, they're not done. They're going to be tested here over the next 5 nights. Do you think that factors into the way Doug Armstrong approaches this deadline?
Yeah, I think it's going to have some impact on what he decides. I ultimately still believe that he's not going to do anything out of the ordinary to help this team this year, believing that it could be a 2nd or 3rd round team. Now, if they continue to play like they have and they beat some of these next couple opponents, when you're talking about Florida and the Rangers and Boston, I mean, if they continue to play the way against these guys that they did the past stretch, I think there's a chance that he starts thinking, okay, well, this is a playoff team. How could we tinker with things to perhaps make it a little better? But I don't think that you'll see anything drastic. And, Tim, you looked at the January schedule and you thought to yourself, wow, how are they going to be able to handle this? I really do believe Drew Bannister set the tone, Tim, when he said, we need hard right now. We went hard. And the Blues have given him that. I think they've responded to his call for that. And I think the other thing is this, and this is why earlier I said a collection of things. What you often see in January when the calendar flips, players start to look at the playoff race. And not that they weren't before, but they start to see, okay, we're in this thing. Hey, we've got a stretch coming up here where this is going to make or break us. And you just start to get that type of play, team play, good defensive play, like we're seeing from the Blues right now. I think they see that they're in this thing, and I think it's going to bode well going into this next stretch of games.
You said, you can't put it on one thing, but there is, and when we talked about it with both Edmonton and Minnesota and the bumps they saw after they made their coaching changes, and then having people theorize going, this is why NHL teams are so quick to the trigger, because so often players feel the responsibility. I was listening to Braden Shen on Chris Kerber's podcast driving out here this morning, talking about it's embarrassing when you're a team and you get your coach fired, and that's how the Blues felt. So how much of that is the embarrassment and then the motivation that comes from it, and then how much of it, in your opinion, is what Drew Bannister has instilled since taking over behind the bench?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to handicap. I think that you can look at the situation 50-50 just for conversation's sake here right now, because it is embarrassing, as Braden Chen says, what had to transpire for this team to get the bump that it got. But you have seen a couple of those teams that got those bumps, like a Minnesota, and then they just have a rash of injuries and they can't move anybody because of their money situation. So it's hard to sustain that. But you see in Edmonton, they get the bump and they keep it up. And, is it the coaching change, or is it probably the talent there that Edmonton had the talent, just wasn't coming together? What I think this Blues situation is I think that I still question the roster. I did that when the coaching change was made. I don't know that this is a roster that you can win a couple rounds in the playoffs with, but I think that there are enough veterans on this team, good veterans, who can feel that embarrassment and say, okay, we got a coach fired. Let's listen to what this new guy has to say. And I think Drew Bannister is instilling some of these habits that they're catching on to that are leading to good hockey. So that's why I think there's a little bit of both going on here with this Blues team.
The developments at the World Juniors running parallel to the Blues beating the Canucks and the Hurricanes probably made hardcore Blues fans have a really nice last week or so, because even if you're going, it's probably not going to happen in the short term for one of the reasons you just cited, the makeup of the roster, the contracts that are committed, you can get excited about what you saw at the World Juniors and the numbers that the members of the Blues organization put up across the board were overwhelming. So I wanted to get into your perspective on what you saw, what members of the organization had to say about it, and how it could impact things in the relative near future with some of those guys getting an opportunity to play with the Blues. So let's start with the World Juniors overall. What is your takeaway?
Yeah, just phenomenal. If you're Doug Armstrong, if you're Tony Feltran, who's their director of amateur scouting, if you're their staff, you could not have drawn it up any better whatsoever. First of all, you get 7 prospects in the World Junior Tournament, the biggest tournament. You're talking best against best, and the Blues had 7 of them, and they put up 44 points collectively, 22 goals, 22 assists. Every one of them factored in. Almost every one of them scored a big goal. You get a gold medal with Jimmy Snuggerud. You get a silver medal. You get a bronze medal from your prospects. It could not have gone any better for the Blues prospects. And you're talking about Blues fans being giddy. You're absolutely right about that. I haven't heard one negative thing in my Twitter feed for, the last week and a half with the way things have gone, both with the team and with the prospects. But how about Doug Armstrong? He's been criticized, including by some of the stuff I've written. But if you look at it big picture, the coaching change so far has worked. You can look at the way the team's playing right now under Drew Bannister. It's worked. So you're staying competitive, Tim. And in the meantime, oh, by the way, look at the future with these prospects. So, I think this is what Doug Armstrong has been envisioning, trying to stay competitive. It's just a matter of, how good can this team be? Can it sustain this? And what can it do in the playoffs if and when it gets in?
And I think taking a step back, and you mentioned the content nature, perhaps, of fans at the moment, in part because of the World Juniors and certainly what's taken place against the Canucks and Hurricanes recently, is if you feel like, okay, we knew kind of going into this year it probably wasn't going to be a cup year, who knows, but it probably wasn't going to happen. Doug Armstrong set the bar back in October with, hey, it'd be nice to be the third-place team in the Central. But if you see his handiwork playing a role in the roster causing the problems for this year, you go, okay, maybe they've lost it a little bit. But then you see what happens in the World Juniors, and then you can buy in, okay, yeah, maybe it's off this year, and maybe the contracts given to the defensemen have played a role in the team not having flexibility. But, man, when you look at what is in the pipeline, you know that the organization has something coming, and in that way they can perhaps buy in more to what Doug Armstrong is doing, leading the organization as a whole. In other words, it's a credibility play in addition to the excitement from the players.
Yeah. I think it can be both, and I know you kind of touched on that, but let me just expand. I think it can be a situation where he made some, let's just call them bad decisions with some of these contracts and put this team in a situation where all of a sudden we saw last year, and then we saw that he had to go through a retool. But then once he looks at the bed he's then laying in, he really attacked it and said, okay, this is what we need to do to get back on track, and here's how we need to draft and acquire draft picks, trade a Ryan O'Reilly, trade a Tarasenko to get these guys who we think that can be here in a couple of years and help this team. You know, that's why, you know, he always talks about the 35,000 feet view, and that's what I'll try to use right now. We're in the here and now, Tim. We're talking about a team that's getting ready to play Florida. You know, how are they going to be able to keep this up? You know, can they make the playoffs? But if a year out from now, 2 years from now, we look back and say, okay, this team didn't hit rock bottom. They weren't 30th in the NHL, but they were competitive. They won 2 rounds in 2023-24, you know, better than we thought they'd be. And, oh, by the way, here comes Snuggerud and here comes Dvorsky. Well, then Doug Armstrong will have accomplished what he set out to accomplish. So everything that he's trying to do, I think it's moving in that direction right now. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But the one point I did start out making and want to finish on, it doesn't, I don't think, take away completely for some of the contract mistakes that were made and the fact that we had to get to this point.
Final line of thought for you here with regard to a couple of the young players. What do you think the timelines are for guys like Snuggerud and Dvorsky?
Yeah, it's you know, I think that when you see the success, you think it's going to happen sooner than later. I still think it's going to take some time. You know, Snuggerud could be here at the end of the year if he decides to go pro and plays a couple games with the Blues at the end, or maybe he goes to Springfield, you know, does the amateur tryout route and plays a few games in there. That's a possibility. You know, Dvorsky, I believe he can go back to junior next year, so he could be back in Sudbury. You know, whether those two guys are on the Blues roster next year or not, I don't think that the Blues go into the season expecting much from them. I think you're looking at 18 months, 24 months before you can say that those guys will likely be on the roster and potentially making an impact, maybe even another year after that. So even all the success that they've had, I think we're still looking a couple of years.
There he is, Jeremy Rutherford. Jackson, I know you had a few questions, but unfortunately it's 10:59, so those will have to wait till next Monday.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, because you would have really put Jeremy to the test, I think.
Right. I thought the analysis was good, but I could have added.
I could just answer one of them real quick. Gary Payton was one of my favorite.
Oh, the glove.
Yeah, his son, damn good player himself.
Yeah, and we'll spend more time on Gary Payton's son next Monday when JR joins us. But for now, we've got to wrap it up because BK and Ferrario are coming up next. Thank you so much, JR.
Thanks, Timmy. See you, buddy.
That's Jeremy Rutherford with us here, wrapping up Balloon Party 101 ESPN and the 101 ESPN YouTube channel.